Let me start by saying this plainly and directly, because this channel exists to preserve hard-earned knowledge, not entertainment fluff. If you care about historical truth and practical survival lessons, subscribe to this channel now and share it with someone who values real preparedness history. What I'm about to walk you through isn't theory, and it isn't modern influencer prepping. This is Cold War civil defense reality, refined under the assumption that warning time might be minutes, not days, and that resupply could be non-existent for months. During the Cold War, governments and households quietly accepted a brutal premise. Panic kills faster than hunger. The so-called panic pantry was never about comfort food or variety. It was about psychological control, metabolic efficiency, and logistics under stress. Modern preppers stock more food than ever, yet often miss the very principles that made Cold War pantries effective. Why Cold War pantries were designed for shock, not convenience. Civil defense planners understood something modern survival culture often ignores. The first 72 hours after a crisis are defined by confusion, fear, and exhaustion. Cold War pantries were structured to function even when thinking was impaired. Foods were selected for minimal decision-making, predictable preparation, and repeatable routines. Meals looked the same day after day on purpose. Familiarity reduced panic, especially in children and the elderly. You can apply this today by intentionally limiting variety in your emergency stores. Choose a small rotation of meals that require no improvisation. Eat them occasionally so your body and mind recognize them as normal. This is not boredom, it is neurological stability under pressure. You know, calorie density really mattered more than taste, and honestly, it still does. Cold War planners, for example, calculated food needs in calories per cubic inch, not flavor. So items like hard wheat crackers, powdered milk, canned fats, and sugar were prioritized because they delivered sustained energy in compact storage. Fat was especially valued since it provided more than twice the calories per gram compared to carbohydrates or protein. A practical modern step, and one that makes a lot of sense, is to audit your pantry by space, not just quantity. Measure how many calories you can actually store per shelf or container. Try to replace bulky, low-calorie foods with dense alternatives. Make sure your cooking fats are shelf-stable and protected from light. These choices were deliberate back then, and honestly, they remain relevant now. Cold storage assumptions, well, they shaped food choices in ways people often forget. Cold War households were told not to rely on refrigeration at all. Power loss was just assumed. That's why shelf-stable dairy substitutes, canned meats, and dried grains dominated official guidance from agencies like the Federal Civil Defense Administration. Freezers, in that context, were considered a liability, not a solution. Modern preppers, well, they often repeat this mistake by depending on frozen food or power-dependent preservation. If your emergency plan assumes electricity returns quickly, it is not a plan. Instead, rebuild part of your pantry with foods that remain edible after years at room temperature, even if that means relearning older preparation methods. Water integration was treated as part of food planning. Cold War pantries were not planned in isolation from water supply. Foods requiring excessive water were discouraged. Powdered foods were calculated carefully so that preparation would not drain limited reserves. Even dishwashing water was accounted for. You can apply this by pairing each food item with a realistic water requirement. Practice preparing meals using measured water quantities. If a meal demands more water than you can reliably store or collect, it does not belong in your core emergency pantry. Packaging was chosen to survive panic handling, not neat storage. Food packaging during the Cold War emphasized durability. Cans could be dropped. Boxes could be crushed. Labels were simple and legible under poor lighting. This was not aesthetic, it was functional under stress. Today, repackage dry goods in containers that tolerate rough handling. Label them clearly with preparation instructions written directly on the container. Assume you may be tired, injured, or working in low light when you need them. Psychological rationing was built into the system. Cold War guidance encouraged eating slightly less than comfortable during the early phase of a crisis. This wasn't cruelty, it was strategic. Slower consumption extended supplies and prevented panic-driven overeating. Routine mealtimes were enforced to create a sense of order. You can, practice this discipline now. Learn what mild hunger feels like and how your body adapts, Train yourself to eat by schedule, not impulse, during short preparedness drills. This mental conditioning is indeed as important as stored calories. Skills mattered as much as supplies, and often, even more. Cold War pantries assumed people knew how to cook basic staples, repair containers, and improvise simple tools. Instructional pamphlets were common because, knowledge loss was recognized as a vulnerability. Modern preppers often collect equipment without really mastering the fundamentals. Learn how to cook grains without precise measurements, practice opening containers without specialized tools, teach these skills to others in your household so, knowledge is not centralized in just one person. Why do these lessons still matter now? The Cold War panic pantry was not built on fear of apocalypse alone. It was built on acceptance of uncertainty. Today's world is different, but human behavior under stress has not changed. Food that calms, routines that stabilize, and systems that function without technology, those remain timeless. If this kind of historical survival knowledge matters to you, subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone who values serious preparedness, and help preserve lessons that were paid for with decades of global tension and hard-earned experience.